Sure. All right. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. Let me see now. This is working. All right. So for the limiting factors of photosynthesis, right? We're looking at the different things, right? The different factors, whether they be abiotic or biotic, that can actually decrease the rate at which the photosynthetic reactions occur, or if they really occur at all, right? So in this case, we're generally looking at the abiotic factors at Unit 2 biology, right? So we're looking at anything that can really decrease the physiological process of photosynthesis, anything that can affect the plant in such a way where it can't photosynthesize, right? So we're generally looking at the main factors, the main things that can actually reduce our entire rate, right? So the main ones that we normally look at are light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature, right? Can anybody explain to me why the temperature graph looks like that?
Because Rubisco is a catalyst and temperature affects catalyst.
All right. So, mm, so I tend to okay. So I'm not sure if it has been seen, but I tend to scrutinize and harass Unit 2 students way more than Unit 1 students. So I'm gonna harass that answer and say that that is not necessarily true. There was an issue with that answer, that response. Right? What the person said is that Ribisco is a catalyst and temperature affects catalysts. But what type of catalyst, though? Go ahead.
It's an enzyme which is a protein, so it will operate at an optimum temperature and
Lovely.
recover.
Lovely. So it's an enzyme, right? So the protein specifically at different temperatures will actually cause their active sites to change, right? Their R groups to flip and to combine with other parts of the polypeptide chain, changing the structure of both the allosteric and the active site, right? So we're gonna have what we call denaturing occurring at a specific temperature. So Rubisco being an enzyme has an optimal temperature. Once we pass that temperature, we're gonna have some amount of denaturing, right? Whether or not we pass the temperature, increasing or decreasing, right? It will affect that, right? For carbon dioxide concentration, can anybody explain that graph to me? Explain the graph. Don't be shy now. Don't have to be shy. It's just a graph. It's not gonna bite you. Could you explain the graph, anyone? Go ahead.
So the carbon dioxide no longer becomes a limiting factor, so the graph would plateau.
Okay, so we're gonna start from the origin and move up the graph. So explain to me why the curve forms like that. So you told me the ending, but you didn't tell me the beginning of the story. So could you explain the entirety of the curve, the entirety of the graph to me? So start with the variables, how they affect each other, and then how the graph or the curve forms like that. So could you do that for me, Maya? Well, Maya or anyone else.
Right, sure. So as the carbon dioxide concentration increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases until it reaches a saturation point or something like that. And then no, um, yeah. So we have the point where Yeah. Yeah, I can show you. But yeah,
Just use the
then it
terms, and that will tell
becomes
you.
constant, and then yeah, carbon dioxide is no longer a limiting factor.
Okay, so we're saying that as we increase the concentration of carbon dioxide, we increase the rate of photosynthesis. Rubisco is an enzyme, therefore, it's the same thing that we look at in Unit 1. Exact same graph. If you look at the graph in Unit 1 for the increase in substrate concentration against an enzyme, is the exact same graph, right? So what's basically happening here, right, is that carbon dioxide will increase until, right, all of the enzymes are used up, right? Rubisco is generally used up and it plateaus off. Or generally what we're talking about is specifically for limiting factors. We won't really use that narrative, but use a narrative that carbon dioxide concentration will continue to increase and that will also facilitate the increase in the rate of photosynthesis, right? But if carbon dioxide concentration continues to skyrocket, right, while the rate of photosynthesis doesn't, right, and it plateaus off, that means that carbon dioxide now will be in excess and not necessarily be the limiting factor, right? So it no longer is be the limiting factor. Something else would have become the limiting factor. Lovely, right? And for light intensity too, right, something like that would have been the case as well, right? So limiting factors, we have light intensity, right? Except for shaded plants, light intensity is not normally a limiting factor for photosynthesis. Very high light intensities may bleach chlorophyll and so retard the process of photosynthesis, right? So not too much light, right? But plants that naturally grow in these conditions have evolved protection devices such as thick cuticles and hairy leaves in order to mitigate that. We also have light duration, which is not really one that we have that is common, right? Photosynthesis is only affected by light duration in that it only occurs during periods of light. Is that true? Is that true? Is that true? Go ahead.
No, sir.
No, right? So it doesn't only occur in periods of light, right? So what we could say is that the light-dependent reaction only occurs there, but the Calvin cycle will continue. So this speaks to the light-dependent reaction, right? The light wavelength as well can affect the limiting factor, right? I think on the 2022 paper there was something with red and blue bulbs and stuff like that. The different wavelengths of light really can affect the rate of photosynthesis as well, as different wavelengths can actually be absorbed and some won't be absorbed by the pigments in the plant, right? So different wavelengths can affect the rates, right? Carbon dioxide concentration, now everybody generally knows how that one goes. Shouldn't be a problem, right? So there's normal atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, which is 0.03 to 0.04%, but increasing the concentration, right, will increase the photosynthetic rate, right? So short-term optimum would be around 0.5%, but this can damage, right, over long periods of time, right? So 0.1% is better. So the group of C4 plants are more efficient at removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? So looking at that. Temperature as well, we know that photosynthesis is controlled by the Rubisco and other enzymes as well, not just Rubisco, but other enzymes, right? And these enzymes are therefore sensitive to temperature, right? The optimum growth tends to be around 25 degrees Celsius for certain plants. We know we have tropical plants, we have temperate plants, we have plants that live around the Arctic ring between the temperate zone, right, and the Arctic zone. So we have plants that actually have an optimum temperature which is different. All right. Now, other types of limiting factor: water availability. The water is vital for photosynthesis and life itself, right? So where there's a lack of water, there's a lack of photosynthetic reactions occurring. Water is used for photolysis within the non-cyclic photophosphorylation, where the electrons will come from. Somebody could argue, say, oh, but there's a cyclic photophosphorylation method, right? But can cyclic phosphorylation actually cause photosynthesis to occur? Can somebody answer that? Can cyclic phosphorylation drive photosynthesis?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can cyclic phosphorylation, or sorry, can cyclic photophosphorylation drive photosynthesis? Can it?
No.
Yes, I think.
Okay, so you said yes. Somebody else said no. All right. Can
Sorry.
anybody explain?
Sorry, what did you say?
I'm asking if cyclic photophosphorylation can drive photosynthesis.
You said dry. That's what you said.
Drive. Sorry about that. Drive.
Oh.
Probably I'm not pronouncing the word right. But can it drive it? Not necessarily. No. Right? Why? Because cyclic photophosphorylation doesn't actually have the creation of NADPH, therefore the Calvin cycle will not occur, therefore no photosynthesis. Right? So while we're looking at the water availability, right, we're looking directly to the non-cyclic photophosphorylation because that is where we actually use water to replace the electrons in photosystem 2. Right? In cyclic photophosphorylation, it doesn't need water. So if you could look at that, right? For plants, right? Generally all plants, generally life itself, right, would need water. Life on earth, it's water based, right? So it needs water. Right? So if the plants could actually go through photosynthesis using cyclic phosphorylation, or sorry, photophosphorylation alone, just cyclic alone, then they won't need water because it doesn't need water. So the water specifically speaking to non-cyclic photophosphorylation, right? And water is generally needed for the growth and development of the plant, right? Which will aid into whether or not it will mature to actually carry out photosynthesis. So we could look at that, right? If there isn't enough water, the turgor pressure as well will not be as strong, right? So the turgor pressure will actually help the plant itself, right, to be to mature properly, right, so that the leaves will not wilt. And if the leaves are not wilting, right, that allows for the increased absorption of light, right? So the increased absorption of light in that way and actually will increase our carbohydrate yield. But if we don't have enough water, we're gonna have wilting and we're gonna lose a lot of the carbohydrate yield that we're supposed to be getting. We have chlorophyll concentration as well, right? Within young leaves, chlorophyll is less concentrated in young leaves than within older leaves, right? Within leaves that are darker in green, would have a higher concentration of chlorophyll. Ones that are lighter would have less concentration of chlorophyll. You could speak about that, right? Yeah, that really speaks to the abundance of nutrients as well, the abundance of nutrients, right? So you could speak about disease can limit photosynthesis. We can have mineral deficiencies, right? Iron, magnesium, nitrogen, right? Phosphorus, these things are needed for plant growth. Therefore, if we don't have them, we don't have necessary chlorophyll production, we have less photosynthesis, right? Oxygen is there as well, right? So oxygen competes with carbon dioxide for the active site of ribulose bisphosphate carboxylase oxalase, right? So if you could speak about that, right? You could speak about that. Remember competitive inhibition from C, Unit 1? Who remembers that? Competitive inhibition. Therefore, right, or you could even look at ligand exchange from chemistry unit 1, right? So you could speak about that, where if we have a high concentration of oxygen, it will compete with the ribulose bisphosphate carboxylase, right? So it will compete with carbon dioxide for the enzyme. If we have high concentration of oxygen, we're gonna have lower rates of photosynthesis. We also have pollution as well. Low levels of ozone and sulfur dioxide are very damaging to some plants, right? So we have that. It can act the soot itself from burning on these materials, right, will actually block the stomata, right, on the sides of the leaf, right, actually blocking any type of gaseous exchange. And also the soot can land on the top of the leaf, blocking light from entering and coating the chloroplasts themselves, right? From receiving light, which will limit photosynthesis. Right. So there are many things that you could look at. Right. I just wanted to speak about the other things that are not just carbon dioxide concentration, temperature, and light intensity. Right? Adding more things to the repertoire. Right? Using limiting factors to optimize plant productivity. This is the last part of this topic. Right? Enhancing agricultural practices. Now, how can we use our knowledge of limiting factors to increase the productivity of plants? Right? For light intensity, light is one of the primary limiting factors, right? So we could look at that. Ensuring adequate lighting exposure, right, and proper plant spacing, right, and canopy management can actually optimize the layout of fields and greenhouses, right, that can actually increase photosynthetic activity. You also have supplemental lighting techniques using types of artificial light in greenhouses, lights that are more red shifted and blue shifted to increase the amount of light that the plant can absorb, right? It makes no sense to use bulbs that give off a lot of green areas of the spectrum because the plants won't absorb that. So we're trying to make sure that plants have enough light or adequate light. We can use our understanding of that limiting factor to increase the productivity of the plant. Alright? Loss of carbon dioxide concentration, right? So if we continue to increase the levels of carbon dioxide to a steady rate, right, or to an optimum rate within different types of spaces, right? So usually within greenhouses, right? We use that, right? So what we're doing is injecting carbon dioxide primarily from industrial processes, right, and recycling it, right, in the greenhouses to increase photosynthetic efficiency, right, and it will reduce carbon emissions. So all those carbon emissions that we're getting, right, if we pump them into greenhouses, right, at the correct concentration, we can have plants absorbing them much faster and increasing the rate of photosynthesis, right? So it's particularly used within enclosed environments such as greenhouses. We also have the temperature here, right? If we control the environmental temperatures within the optimum ranges, right? Climate and using climate control systems, right, such as heating and cooling mechanisms in greenhouses, right? Agriculturalists, right, or what we call farmers, right, can ensure favorable conditions for photosynthesis, right? Minimizing any type of temperature-related stress on the plants. That makes sense, right? So utilizing heat tolerant or cold tolerant crops are important as well, right? So within the Caribbean region, right, we plant different crops that are heat tolerant, right? If you go to temperate regions such as the areas of Canada, southern Argentina, in Scotland, in Australia, these areas, right, a good amount of the plants that are heat tolerant won't really make sense there, right? So they tend to use cold tolerant plants or crops as well, right? So the knowledge of the temperature, right, can be used to increase the productivity of farms, right? Water availability is important as well, right? Implementing efficient irrigation systems, right, such as drip irrigation, sensor-based irrigation, especially hydroponic systems, can also increase the rate at which we have water entering the plant. It increases it to optimal soil moisture levels and prevent any type of water stress on the plant, right? They note, that some plants cannot have too much water, right? So you would have to use that knowledge of the plants as well in order to know which ones can benefit from hydroponic systems, etc. Right? Employing drought tolerant crops are important as well, right? So if you're in an area that is drought prone, right? So drought tolerant crops could work within those areas, right? As well as utilizing water saving technologies such as mulching and rain harvesting, right? So those things can be used to limit the limited water availability within certain regions, right? Nutrient availability as well. This is where we talk about the lack of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, these metals that are used within metabolic processes for photosynthesis, right? We're going to be looking at increasing their frequency within the soil via fertilization, right? So using those things could help. So you remember, if there's a mineral deficiency within the plants, photosynthesis will not occur at its best rate or its optimum. Therefore, we need to implement these things, right, in order to increase the nutrient availability within the plants so that it may develop properly, right, and photosynthesize efficiently, right? So we're looking at those stuff. That's really it. Any questions or concerns here from the limiting factors?